So yeah, this was Ben can tell you more of the story, but really just an expression of going, what else needs to happen in the church? And Kingdom Dreams Initiative was birthed kind of alongside and within, but also outside the church, where we just even had a gathering here 2 days ago for entrepreneurs and business leaders and people who are trying to start something new, and they're going, I've got this kingdom dream in my life, and looking for a tribe, looking for a community to birth that. And so really, we've just been walking alongside of people, and we're excited because I think some breakthrough can happen in this room today. Because we're not talking about concepts. We're not just talking about ideas. Those things are important. We're talking about how do we actually move into the things God's placed in our hearts. And we're enjoying this work because we're getting to see real dreams happen. We're getting to see things that God's planted in people's lives actually take shape and form, and there's nothing better to hear those stories, to hear those testimonies. And it looks like all different kinds of things. It is ministries, it is businesses, it is just small expressions where you're like, I wouldn't even call this a ministry or nonprofit or business. It's just an expression of someone's life that they're going, this wasn't able to come out until I was walking with a group of people and encouraged me in this and gave me some tools and some steps. So we're going to be walking through some stuff today to get you some breakthrough, and we're going to process together and do Q&A. So it's going to be a fun, dynamic time.
Yeah, it's great. I've been a pastor for 26 years, and in those 26 years, one of the things that I've realized is that pastors are really good at getting people fired up about something, right? They can cast a vision, get people excited about something. And so one of the things I realized was a lot of the work that I was doing was kind of stirring people towards action. But a lot of the action that I was stirring people towards was my dream. It was all kind of like, you guys have all had this experience where the pastor calls you and is like, hey, we need some more volunteers to do this so that you can help our church grow. Or we need more money for this so that we can help this thing grow. Or we need more leaders or prayer or whatever. And it felt like so much of the invitations that I was giving to the people that I was leading was, come help me build my thing. And we started wondering and praying. The lead pastors had a retreat a couple years back in the summer, and we kind of gather every summer and dream together and pray together. And the conversation kind of started stirring towards, what if we flip the script on that? And rather than just inviting people to build our dream, what if we started to say, every single follower of Christ has a kingdom dream that is in your heart? Ephesians 2 says there is a good work that has been prepared for you in advance, which means that God created you, made you, intimately put you together, gave you the skills, the giftings, the competency, the character, the context, the place. All of those things have been placed in you because there's a good work that he has prepared to come out of you. And so God has deposited something in every follower of Christ, the priesthood of all believers. And the question is, like, what does it look like for that thing to come out? And that word good work is the word ergon. That word in the Greek actually means occupation. So sometimes we read that as like there's a good work, there's just like a nice thing for me to do, right? Like today I'm going to call a friend and check on them and see how they're doing. That's the good work that's been prepared in advance for us. It actually means occupation. There is a kingdom assignment that has been given to every follower of Jesus. And what if the church started to awaken the kingdom assignments, to walk alongside of people, helping them design their lives around that kingdom assignment, gave them mentors and training to develop them in that assignment, and watched as the world was transformed. And so this is so exciting for me for a number of different reasons. I'm a starter. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a dreamer. I'm an apostle. I don't know what word you give for me, but the thing that I love most is ideas. Like, I love, like, with the title of this conference gets me hyped immediately, right? Awaken the dream. One of our core values at Grace Marietta is wreck the roof. We will wreck the roof to get people to Jesus. We are not stuck in some kind of box. We're going to think outside the box. We're going to dream big dreams. We're going to discover ideas. And I feel like I'm a spiritual entrepreneur. Right? If I'm having lunch with somebody and they're talking about ideas or dreams, especially if it's dreams about how to expand the kingdom or how to share the name of Jesus, like I actually get an adrenaline rush in those meetings. I can sit and talk and dream all day long, and I love it. I feel like that's the thing that God has given me. And so the thing that we started discussing is like maybe we need a new metaphor for the church. We've used all kinds of different metaphors of like maybe the church is a hospital for the sick, maybe the church is a rescue team, I don't know what. There's all kinds of different metaphors for what the church is, but what if we at Grace started imagining the church as a dream factory? What if the church was a place where every believer came into these seats? I mean, imagine this place filled 3 times on Sundays, and imagine what happens when the God dream in the heart of every one of the young people that's hanging out here in Midtown starts to become awakened, and there's leaders that are coming beside them and equipping them and empowering them and giving them what they need so that they can pursue the God dream that's in their heart. I think that's when revival starts. I've been doing ministry for so long, guys, and I'm committed to this. The second half of my life, I do not want to do ministry in the 4 walls of the church. I want to do it outside. And so much of our discipleship has been in the classroom. And so our discipleship is we just sit down and we take another class. We study another book. We read another thing. And we're doing all of these things either in our homes with a bunch of other Christians, or we're doing them in the church, in a classroom in the church, rather than what Jesus did, which is disciple on the road, where we're walking alongside of people, empowering them, equipping them, giving them what they need, calling out power and authority in them. Like, guys, that session that we just did was so powerful for me, because watching the next generation of Grace leaders step up here and teach was so much more fulfilling than me standing up here and teaching. I would give up the platform every single time so that the next generation can do what just happened. Like, there is something beautiful about the idea of we get to disciple and empower the next generation to do the thing that God has placed inside of them and walk alongside of them. So when we're talking about a kingdom dream, here's where people get confused. Because we're not talking about any specific thing, because the dream that's in your heart could be completely different than mine. The dream that's been in my heart since I was a young kid was to pastor. I went to the International Youth Conference in Winnipeg, Canada when I was 12 years old, and Duffy Robbins, if you're an old school youth ministry guy, Dave's the only one that knows who that is. Duffy Robbins, old school OG of youth ministry, was standing up there preaching, and he did the whole, like, back in the day, we didn't know how to do altar calls and that kind of stuff, so you would just do 35 altar calls for kids, and then you would do the, like, if you're called, you're only called to be a pastor, so who wants to be a pastor? And I was this goofy 12-year-old kid who nobody expected to stand up, and I walked up front and I said, I'm giving my life to Jesus. I'm becoming a pastor. From this day forward, my life is I'm going to be a preacher. I got these prophetic words from these crazy people about preaching and teaching, and all these things were given to me about, like, this is going to be what you're going to do. And so that's my kingdom dream. That's not your kingdom dream. There's people in here who your kingdom dream is to start a business. And it's to employ people and give people honor and respect and dignity and to make money for the kingdom and to build enterprise and do things for the community. There's people in here who your kingdom dream is to do something in the Muslim world or something on the mission field. It's to go to a place where there's needs and there's hurts and there's brokenness, and to do that. There's people in here who already, like, I'm already working. I'm not going to quit my job. I'm not going to start something new. I'm not going to do some giant thing. But I've got 5 hours a week, and my heart is to pray for teachers. And my kingdom dream in this season for me is to pray for teachers. And I want to start a ministry where we're praying for teachers. Like, it's this idea of looking at our calling and understanding that our purpose stays the same, but our calling shifts during seasons. And so our purpose is always to glorify God. It's to preach the gospel. It's to share the good news. But in different seasons, we have different callings and different opportunities. And so today, we want to spend some time walking through kind of some of the things that we've developed. So Matt and I started praying, the lead pastor started praying, and we started an organization called Kingdom Dreams Initiative. And what we're doing is we're just walking along dreamers. The simplest thing that I can say that we do is we help Christians launch their kingdom dream. So if there is a kingdom dream inside of you, if there is something that you're saying, I think God's stirring me towards this, I just keeps coming up over and over again, and I keep getting stuck somewhere along the way. Or there's this thing that I know God wants me to launch, I just don't know how to put it all together. I don't know how to make all the pieces fit. So we've started doing cohorts. We started gathering leaders from kind of all over the country and investing in them. We started doing events and trainings. Matt just said we did an amazing entrepreneur event here on Thursday night. night where just a bunch of business leaders from the Atlanta area were gathering together, dreaming about what we could do when the dream is awakened inside our hearts, and we're starting to stir up dreams for the community. So this morning, here's what I want to do. I want us to throw gasoline on your dream a little bit today. Right? I want us to give you some faith that thing that's in your heart, that God is in it and he's working and he's moving and it can actually come to fruition. And we also want to share kind of the process in which we feel like these kind of dreams are developed. So Matt and I are both starters. Matt's going to come up and kind of share kind of some of the process that we've learned. And what we've tried to do is kind of codify some of the ways in which we see dreams going from this is just an idea that's in my heart to this is something that's been deployed and is actionable and is actually happening in the world. Because I think too often we live in our heads. Too often we get stuck in a moment. Too often we start to launch the dream and we start to step into it and it gets hard and we back off. Too often we don't count the cost. Too often we don't design our life around the dream. And every bit of those things, to me, feels like the discipleship work that we should be doing here at Grace, is helping people launch those things. So I want you to imagine an army of people from Grace who are awakened to their dream, who are living into their dream, who are deploying their dream, and then discipling others to live into their dream. And I want you to imagine the amount of revival that could take place if that happens. So let me pray for us. Matt's going to come up and share kind of our launch sequence and kind of some of the ways in which we've codified this material. Father, we just thank you for this day. I thank you for these leaders in the room. Lord, we just give you this space and we give you this time. We ask you to have your way with us. I recognize that in this space right now, Jesus, there are dreams that need to be birthed today, that they're stirring, but they're not clear. And so I pray for clarity and wisdom, and I pray that you would just stir up a dream. I pray that for the dream that's died, the person that had a dream and wanted to live into it and was excited about it, but somewhere along the way it got hard or it got difficult or it just stopped or life got busy. I pray that you would resurrect that dream today. I pray for our churches that we would become dream factories, and I pray that you would get all the praise and all the glory. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Okay, so thanks so much, Ben. So we're gonna talk through kind of the building blocks of this in what we call the launch sequence. And again, like Ben said, I've been a serial starter. Any other like serial entrepreneurs in here, even if it's like social entrepreneurship or community entrepreneurship? All right, only a couple of you guys. Some people are raising, other people's hands. That's good. You're like, yes, you are. Because you're like, stop starting stuff. Our life is too full. That's what my wife says to me. But yeah, I mean, I remember I got saved and it was like, all right, now do a D group. Like a month or two in, I'm like, all right, let's start a group, and house church, just, that was something we started. This whole building project was like a really cool entrepreneurial endeavor for our church. If you give me enough time, I'm going to start something. Like a basketball game on Friday mornings that's still going on, which is so fun, or a poker game, which I haven't gotten to do in a few years, but if you gave me enough time, and I would do that. But here's the thing. This is the problem. I didn't know what I was doing or how I was doing it. Some of the worst talks I've ever given are like teaching other people how to be a pioneer or to accomplish a dream. I'd be like, all right, here's how I was trying to like deconstruct the process. Like, how do we get here? Like, what was the sequence? And they were just terrible. And partly that's just because it's not my gift. But I think the other part was like, I lacked a proven process of like, how did these things happen? So you might not even be aware of it. Like, how did these dreams happen? How did you accomplish these entrepreneurial endeavors? So that's kind of what the core of our work here is a proven process from the journey of idea where you're like, I think this is a God idea. I want to put some resources behind it. I want to put some time behind it. I want to get some other people involved in it. I believe in it. So from idea to like it actually happened, it actually manifested. There's so many dreams that I think God wanted to happen that fizzled and died because we didn't have a process and we didn't have a community to walk with. So the process is so important. So that's really what we're going to go into. And here's the other thing. When you don't have a proven process and you don't know the sequence, the next steps, the building blocks, if you will, you waste a lot of time trying to figure out where you are. All right, what's the next step? What do I need to do? Do I need to go back, have another retreat and think about the idea some more? So many of us that I've been talking to in this thing are like, man, I'm just in my head. I'm thinking it out over and over again. How am I going to say it? And there's no sense of action. So what's in that article and what we're going to start walking through is these 4 Ds, okay? These 4 Ds. This is the launch sequence. And the business world has had some of these tools. There's some revelation out there. We're going to look at Nehemiah. It's all here. This process is here. What we're doing is just saying, hey, how do we get this back into the church so we can use this to see more kingdom impact? We should actually be leading the way in this. Like, we have an unfair advantage. Rhodes does this talk on wisdom and power. Like, we actually have this conduit of revelation and wisdom from the Spirit. We have an intergenerational body of knowledge that we can pull from. So we really want to, again, activate the church. So these 4 Ds have been huge. This is our launch sequence. And so I'm just going to read them out here. The first stage is discover. The second stage, and we have slides for all these. The first stage is discover. The second stage, or the next building block, is design. Then it's about development. And finally, it's deploy. And here's what's really important. These have to go in sequence. Like, you need to spend enough time in discover and make sure it's sound and that you're committed to it before you move on to design. And a lot of times, this is what I've done. And I didn't know I was doing this to people. I'm like, hey, God's speaking to you something in a house church or in church. And I'm like, all right, just go do it. I just go from discover to deploy every time. I didn't even know those 2 other stages. No, you need to do some design thinking. You need to allocate some resources. You need to change some rhythms in your life. You need to make some space for some things. You need some people to come alongside to help do some development. So for so many of us, if you just were this 1% intuitive, you could go from I've got this dream to actually making it happen. The rest of us, myself included, we need all these steps. So it's a building block. Every step has to be built on the other. The other thing is that we really have to focus on the turn. So what we're going to do in this session and do some processing around is define each D, and then we're going to talk about how to make the turn. That's where a lot of stuff fizzles out and dies again. We don't make the turn from discover to design or from design to develop. And so we're going to talk about that. So the first, discover, and again, the long form is in that article, and I helped put that article together. I've read it 3 or 4 or 5 times now. I told Ben, every time I read it, it gets better. I'm like, because it's straight out of Nehemiah. I mean, there's a whole lot of scripture, but I'm like, this is actually true, okay? And that's the thing. We're not trying to sell something here. This isn't about pumping somebody up. This is actually what has helped us see things happen. I'm going, I think this is going to help a lot of people if we can just codify it. So if it doesn't help you, flush it. If it does help you, let's go, baby. Make some impact. And once we learn how to do it and say, okay, this is what I've been doing, I think we can help a lot of other people as well. So discovery is all about awareness. It's all about awareness. It's all about paying attention to what's impacting our hearts. So I'll read to you from Nehemiah, and you can look there if you want. But in Nehemiah chapter 1, the whole book starts with Nehemiah, this leader of Israel, but he's with kind of the exiled people. He's not in Israel. He hears about the devastation that Israel's in ruins, and it breaks his heart. It breaks his heart. It says in Nehemiah 1:4, when I heard these things, that the wall of Jerusalem was broken down, its gates had been burned with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. Discovery is about awareness. What's happening in my heart? What's making me cry? Where is there a sense of godly sorrow? And in one of the articles, it says the difference between a dream and a kingdom dream is godly sorrow. Man, this really bothers me. Something's not right about this. He goes on to say, I sat down, I wept for many days. I mourned and fasted and prayed. He took time to go, God, what's going on in my heart? What am I supposed to do about this? Nehemiah's kingdom dream, it was planted in a place of sorrow. Some new journeys start from us from pain. We don't want the pain, we don't like it, but that's the very place sometimes God plants a new seed of something he wants to birth actually through us. This thing was going to be way bigger than Nehemiah. It wouldn't have happened without him. It was birthed through him, and it ended up touching a whole lot of other people. So he takes some time. It doesn't happen overnight. He felt led to rebuild it. It didn't happen overnight. There was a process. He needed time and space to reflect, pray, and hear from God. So Discover is all about taking time and space. We do a whole retreat where it's just a discovery retreat. Let's take some time. Let's look at our stories. Let's look at our past successes. Let's really take some time to be with God in a beautiful place and say, what wants to happen? I'll give you an example of big and small kingdom dreams. We got to have our first retreat at one of my friend's house who bought this lake house, and he said, we were not planning on doing this, but we sold this property that we felt led to. We felt led to buy this place so that these kinds of things could happen. I was living in that man's kingdom dream. We had a retreat. Men, it's not supposed to be all men, but men were just at this one, sitting around a fire, talking about their relationship with their dad and how their relationship, how their dad's relationship with their work affected them. I mean, it was holy ground. I'm going, this doesn't happen. This transformation doesn't happen without a commitment to discovery, but it didn't happen without this person birthing this kingdom dream that we're living in. It takes time. Then there's a inward commitment. And here's one of the things that's so powerful. Jesus says, before you do something, count the cost. Before someone builds a tower, they count the cost. Before someone goes to war, they count the cost. There's a counting the cost, but here's a design principle that we're really passionate about. It's a freedom thing. This is a choice. So what happens? Nehemiah has this whole moment. Then in chapter 2, he's standing before the king. The king says, something's going on with you. He says, this can be nothing else but sadness of heart. Something's happening inside of you that's affecting you. And then Nehemiah told him what was bothering him. And then verse 4, the king said to him, what is it you want? Guys, this scripture spoke to me a couple years ago so strongly. I'd never, this like messed up my discipleship. Like, no, I don't get to say what I want. It's just obedience. But there's a deeper level of partnership with God where he's saying, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want to do? I'm not going to force this dream on you. You get to say yes to it. You get a choice. So that line always stuck out to me, but I didn't know where it fit. And then even just preparing this week, I'm like, this is where it fits. This is part of the discover process. What do you want? I'm not going to come to you and tell you what dream you have to do. You get to discover. That's part of the fun. You get to discover it. You get to sense it. Go, this has been a part of my story. Or this is so clearly part of this season. Let God kind of give yourself permission. Honestly, the design principle of freedom to say, if God asked me that question, what do I want? What would you say? What would you say? Man, this is what I want, God. Nehemiah's sitting there going, if this city could be rebuilt, and if I could be a part of it, man, I want that. He wanted it. So it wasn't that hard for him to go, you know what, it's scary, and I feel kind of weird, but he's like, I need some stuff from you, King. I need resources. I need these trees. I need these people. I need these letters. He asked that. He was willing to be bold because he said, I really want this. And he accounted the cost. He was going to sacrifice for it. If it's a kingdom dream, you're willing to suffer for it. And that's a good question to ask yourself in the discover phase. Am I willing to suffer for this? It doesn't mean the whole thing's going to be suffering. But man, if push comes to shove, if I got to bleed for this, if I got to cry for this, if this is going to take longer than I think, which it always does, if I'm going to lose some stuff over this, some sleep, some money, am I willing to do it? I'm telling you guys, we're living in a kingdom dream right here. Like, this took years of suffering and sacrifice. It makes every session we do in this room worth it to me because I'm going, man, it was worth it. It's worth it. What do you want? If God asks you that question, what do you want? So here's what we're going to do. To take the turn on this corner, and we're going to do some processing right here. It's about discernment. It's about commitment. It's about freely and clearly saying, this is what I want, declaring it. So we're going to just kind of practice in your notes here, and we got a slide for this question, but what are 3 potential dreams you have for your life, church, or family right now? Oh, we don't have a slide. Okay. So we're going to give you a couple minutes. Maybe we can put some music on, but just want you to write out, like, here's a couple dreams I have right now? What are some potentials? You're just starting a list. You're not committing to this. You're just saying, man, here's what I want. Here's what I'd love to see. Here's what I've cried over. This is what would speak to me. I know for Ben, launching KDI, this was a dream. This was a dream. For me, I'm coaching basketball for the first time. Man, I need all these design principles. It's been a lot of work, but I'm going, this is so fun. This is something that I felt God told me to commit to. And it's a lot of work, more work than I thought, but I'm getting to serve these 3rd through 5th graders. I'm going, man, this is a dream. I love it. So what are some of the dreams? What would you love to see? What are you passionate about seeing come to life? We'll just have a couple minutes and write a few of those things down.
We're going to go ahead and move on to the next building block, which is design. Like Ben and Matt said earlier, my name is Allie. I'm part of the Grace Marietta team and the KDI team. Got my little hype crew over there. But so the next block we're going to talk about is design. And in a second, we're all going to get to talk with each other and share a little bit. So just know that that's coming. But the design process, what we do next when we go into this next building block, it is like the blueprint. Imagine it like drawing a blueprint for living out your dream, for taking that step to develop your kingdom dream. So before we dive into it, I have a couple questions. Who here likes to travel? Everyone, right? Everyone likes to travel. Who likes to plan their trip? Okay, so I'm not the only nerd here. I love planning trips. I love it. I might like it almost as much as going on the trip. I love the research. I love looking stuff up. I love finding the best place to stay, the best restaurants to eat, the best places to go. I live for it. Who hates that? Yeah, you just want to go and like someone hand you an itinerary and just you live it out, right? Well, you pay attention to these next 2 blocks then because these are for you. But so when you imagine your kingdom dream, imagine it like that, like a destination that we're trying to get to. But before we can get to that destination, we can go on this trip, we have to build the roads. We have to plan our pathway to get to this destination. And that is what design looks like so that we can live out our kingdom dream the best way possible. So let's look at Nehemiah. And let's remember, as we're going through this journey of Nehemiah, that these are building blocks. They build on one another. So first, let's remember what Matt said, because when we go into design, we have to remember what we learned in Discover. We have to remember what our dream was. And what Nehemiah realized when he was feeling this sorrow wasn't that he wanted to rebuild a wall, right? I mean, maybe he had like this really intense like aesthetic that he liked this wall. No, he wanted to rebuild a community. He wanted there to be a home for his people. That was his dream. That is what he wanted to rebuild. When the king asked him what he wanted, and he said, I want to rebuild, it was rebuilding a community. It was rebuilding this sense, this place, this home for his people. And so you have to remember why you're setting out on this journey to get to this destination when you start designing, or else you'll get lost in the process and you won't be able to make the turn. So let's look at what Nehemiah did. When he set out on this journey, when the king sent him with all of these resources, when he went to rebuild, he started with design. So in chapter 2, starting in verse 11, it says, after I arrived in Jerusalem and had been there 3 days, I got up at night and took a few men with me. I didn't tell anyone what God had laid on my heart to do for Jerusalem. The only animal I took was the one I was riding. Very important detail. I went out at night, through the valley gate, toward the serpent's wall and the dung gate, again, interesting, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that had been broken down and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. I went onto the fountain gate in the king's pool, and further down, it became too narrow for my animal to go through, so I went up at night by way of the valley and inspected the wall. Then heading back, I entered through the valley gate and returned. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, for I had not yet told the Jews, priests, nobles, officials, or the rest of those who would be doing the work. So I said to them, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned. Come, let's rebuild Jerusalem's wall so that we will no longer be a disgrace. So Nehemiah knew that he wanted to rebuild the city. That was his vision. We think of him as this guy who rebuilt the wall, but his vision was to rebuild a community. But he went and he looked and he was like, what do we need to do? What is the first thing that we need to do? We need to rebuild the wall. That is first. That's the first step. He saw, he observed, he took these advisors with him, and he designed what he thought needed to be first. Now, this is a design principle that we call the minimal viable action. Ooh, it's a mouthful there. But it is the first step that we need to take to get the highest impact. So when Nehemiah went out with his advisors and he looked at what had happened to the city, he said, if we rebuild the wall, we won't be a disgrace anymore. What he meant was we will be demonstrating power to those around us. We're doing something here. Something's happening. But also we'll be protecting as we rebuild what's inside the wall. So he said, let's design this the best way possible to live out the dream of rebuilding a home for the people of Israel. Now, the truth is, though, that dreams can get stuck if we don't design. If we don't design well, dreams can get stuck. If Nehemiah didn't come up with this minimal viable action, then it could get stuck. Think about traveling. Like I said earlier, we all like to travel. I love to travel to the mountains. That's my dream place to travel. Who's a mountain person here? Okay, who's a beach person? Okay, now I know who my people are. I'm looking at y'all. I see you beach people. No, I'm just kidding. So when you imagine going to the beach or going to the mountains, I don't think that we all imagine I just want to go sit in some sand. That's not our end goal. I mean, when I think about going to the mountains, I have this picture-perfect view of me sitting on this back porch with a pullover hoodie, staring at this serene view with a cup of coffee in my hands. But that's not actually why I'm going. I'm going for connection with my family, or to relax, renewal of my mind, or to connect with God and nature. That's why we're going. But I will never get this picture-perfect view that I'm imagining, or this time with my family, or this connection if I don't plan. If I don't book the Airbnb, if I don't see how long it'll take for us to get there, if I don't plan out our meals, make a packing list, I will never get to live into this dream. This is where our dreams can get stuck if we don't focus on the design. Nehemiah knew that he couldn't just sit around and hope that the wall would be rebuilt, or else he would have been a cupbearer for the rest of his life with this vision in his mind, never actually living it out. But now we know thousands of years later, when we hear Nehemiah, we think he rebuilt the wall. That's how we know him. But it wasn't just because he discovered his dream. He designed it, and he began to take steps to live it out. So when we're making this turn, I believe that the two reasons we get stuck making this turn is that we confuse the vehicle and we need advisors. So this is where I'm going to give you a couple examples of the work we're doing at Grace Marietta, which has been so much fun. For the last year, we've been digging into this with the people at Grace Marietta. And what I've seen is that this design turn here is where dreams die the fastest, because discovery is fun. We all want to know what our calling is. We all want to hear from the Lord and hear these beautiful, amazing dreams that he has for our life. And then we start to sit down and design it, and we're like, oh, this is hard. This is where we have to start counting the cost. And it gets difficult. And I have seen time and time again with our people that this is where the dreams start to die. And we don't want that to happen here. We want to figure out how to make this turn. So the first thing is that we confuse the vehicle. And what I mean by this is we mix up the destination and the road. We make the road the destination. And we forget where we're trying to go. We think, I just want to sit on a beach. Instead of, I want to connect with my family. I want this to be an important time. So, for example, we had this couple from our church who went through our discovery process, and they were so fired up. They were so excited. They had this dream that they wanted to shape and change the lives of families in our community through mentorship and through education. And they had all these ideas. They were like, we could start a STEM program where people learn about higher education and we can get middle schoolers in it. We could start this community center. We could create educational resources for moms so they know what to feed their children. And I was like, these are all incredible. And they were like, but we have 3 young kids at home. I don't think we can start a community center right now. That's probably not going to work. And so what I had to remind them is that a community center was not their destination. Their destination was equipping and empowering families in our community. They didn't have to build this really fancy road to start getting to their destination. They had to design their life to live out their dream. So they realized the first minimal viable action that they could take was just serving in our kids and student ministry, and they're doing that now. But they didn't stop. They didn't say, okay, we've reached our destination. We're now serving kids and students. This week, the wife from this couple came up to me and said, hey, I started my next thing. I started a group meeting weekly at the preschool that I work, and I'm meeting with families, I'm meeting with teachers, and we're learning how to meet the needs in our community. So they took that first step. They mapped out, they designed it so that they could start living out their dream, but they didn't get distracted by thinking that the vehicle was this amazing, shiny community center that they might make one day. I still believe they're going to do it. But for now, they are doing what they can to live out that destination, to serve kids and families in their community. The second thing that I think keeps us from making this turn is that we need advisors. When we start going on this trip, Nehemiah took advisors with him when he mapped out how he was going to design the plan. We need people to speak into our life, to pour into us and show us maybe where we're a little bit blind as we're designing things. Another example is there's this man in our community, and he went through the Discover process, and he wanted to start this mentorship program. And he knew the exact mentorship program he wanted to do. There were conferences on it. He could get trained. He could start designing how he wanted to live this out. So he goes to this conference, and he comes back, and he's so excited. He's telling his wife about it. And she's like, whoa, 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 whoa. You can't do this. You haven't counted the cost. You haven't looked and actually examined your life to see how this will fit in it. And he realized that for him, the minimal viable action he had to take was cutting his work week from 5 days to 4. How many of us are ready to count that cost? Trimming our work week back so we can live out our kingdom dream? But he's done that. He's figured out how to drop a day of work from his week so he can start this mentorship program to live out his dream. But he realized when he started to map out his life, when he started to design to live the dream, that there was actually a different first step he had to take. But he wouldn't have seen that if he hadn't talked to his wife about it, if she hadn't spoken to him and told him that he needed to make this shift. So those are the two things that I have seen in our time at Marriott. I could tell you so many amazing stories of things happening there. If you want to hear more about what we're doing there, I'd love to talk to you about it. But I want to get you all talking with each other. So as I'm talking, as I'm saying all of this, maybe for you a minimal, I cannot get that word today, viable action, it immediately came to your head. So think about that. What is the minimal viable action that you could take today to start living out your dream? And how would you start mapping that out? And if you don't have that, if you're like, I'm not even close to there yet, maybe just share some of the kingdom dreams that you wrote down earlier when Matt talked. But go ahead, take a couple minutes, share with each other. Maybe just share what you're thinking and feeling in this moment.
All right, let's just talk about this for a second. What are some dreams that are stirring? What are some things that you're saying, I don't know the full picture of this, but maybe God is calling me to ... Anybody got something? What are the dreams that are kind of stirring in the room? Is there something that like maybe God is stirring this? Go ahead, right here. I can't hear you, I'm sorry. Foster and adopt. Amen. I'm an adoptive dad, and that's a worthy work. Educate people to grow food. Awesome, amazing. Sorry. Marine? Mary? Soul care ministry. Emotional health. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
I have a couple that ultimately changed my career path to be where God wants me to be, start a nonprofit.
Yes, awesome. So change of career path to start a nonprofit. All of these are amazing. Go ahead. Disciple others as they deal with trauma. Come on. So did you say something different? Did I get it wrong? No. Awesome. Yes, right here.
I want to work with pastors and other leaders who have been in the retreat many years and are weary and tired.
Yes. Come on. Come on. We need it. We need it. That's wonderful. All of those things are wonderful. And here's we just did that for a minute. And here's what started to happen in the room. Somebody was like, oh, I like that one too. I like that one too. I like that one too. But we don't have these conversations in the church. We don't have spaces where we host these kinds of conversations and we have these kinds of discussions. But what happens is as one person starts dreaming, it stirs up the dreams in one another and you create a culture of dreaming. And you also create spaces where you start saying, I can help you design that. I've got some expertise in that area, or I know somebody that you have to talk to, or I know somebody that, can help you with that, or you know who you need to meet with, or I've got resources that I want to send towards that, or I want to partner with you in that. We start to awaken and stir up these dreams, and amazing, amazing things start to happen. So here's the deal. We do not have time to go through all 4 of these building blocks. We overestimated our ability to do that in a short period of time. Those of you who are here, you've got the article which walks through all of that. And so all of that material, that's your homework, is to walk through, deploy, and develop as you go. But here's what I want to talk about. The discover and the design. This is why all of these things, they have to work together. Because what happens oftentimes is we do one part of this process without the other 4. And that's why we don't get traction. That's why we don't get to where we're going. And so we dream about things, we awaken things, we stir something up, but we don't have a plan for it. And so discover and design, the top part of the building blocks is about your life. The bottom part, develop and deploy, is about your plan. It's about your business. It's about your entrepreneurial thing. It's about the dream that's actually inside of you. And so the top part is about your character. This is all about discerning what's your identity, who are you called to be, what's around my life right now, and how do I live into this. The bottom part is about competency. It's about, okay, I've got this dream. I know I'm called to it, right? I'm willing to suffer for it. I love that, guys. Because what happens if we believe that if we start designing and developing and deploying ourselves into a dream that we're not ready to suffer for, the first time it gets hard, we quit. Or oftentimes what we do is we design our lives and we're doing a really good job of living somebody else's dream. We're not leaning into the thing that actually I was designed for, the good work that I was prepared to do in advance. And that doesn't mean we know all the answers. It doesn't mean that we have it all figured out. And so that bottom section is about, I've got to get mentors. I've got to get people around me to help me. I've got to grow in expertise. Like, watch how masterful Nehemiah is at gathering other leaders to help the work take place. Like, Nehemiah did not show up and say, we're building a wall and I'm the expert and I'm going to do everything. He gathered a team. He gathered leaders. He gathered workers. He gathered the finest skills the craftsmen and got all the materials. He thought through the costs. He gathered leaders in all kinds of different ways. And then all kinds of obstacles came along the way. And in the middle of those obstacles, every single time he was willing to suffer for the kingdom dream that God had placed in his heart. So I want to share this a little bit here and show you kind of a picture of kind of how this works when we flesh this out a little bit. Because what we're talking about is we don't just need a dream, we need a plan. And so some of us, what we have is we have a kingdom dream. We know exactly what God's called us to, but we don't have a plan of how to get there. And so oftentimes what we do is we live into that dream without ever developing any kind of plan, right? So what we've got here is we've got a plan or we've got a strategy. And over here, we've got a dream, or we can say a vision. I've got a vision for what's next. And oftentimes, both organizations and individuals will live into the wrong quadrants, right? So this is where we want to be. We want to have a plan and a strategy and a dream. We call that a kingdom dream. That's where there's something that I'm willing to suffer for. There's something that I know that I'm called to, and I'm developing a plan of how to get there. And we have both a road and a destination. We need to move that out of the way. We have both a road and a destination, right? So we know what our destination is. Our destination is, I want to get to this kingdom dream. I want to go through this entire process. I want to launch this thing. But we also have a road and how to get there. So here's my thing. I'm really good at the destination, right? As a pastor, I can stand up in front of the congregation and stir everybody up towards a vision or a destination or a future. I am terrible at how do we get to that destination. So I need an executive pastor like Douglas Tappan who could come alongside of me and help me build the roads and can say, you're not counting the cost. This is how much this is actually, you're literally not counting the cost. This is how much something like that would cost. Like, this is how these kinds of things work. All of those kinds of things. So what happens oftentimes is when we have a plan without a dream, we just have a dutiful plan. Not beautiful, dutiful, right? And so we're just going through the duty of working things out. And we've got this road, but there's no destination to it. I don't know if you've ever worked in an organization where you feel like we're working really hard, but I have no idea why we're doing it. Right? We're just going through the motions every day. We've got all kinds of procedures and strategies and things in place, but we don't actually have a dream of how to get there and a destination that's ahead. If you don't have a plan or a dream, we're just going to say this is a nightmare. Right? If you've ever worked in an organization that doesn't have a vision and doesn't have a strategy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a nightmare. It's a terrible place to be. It's an awful place to stand, and it's really, really difficult. So we don't want to be in this quadrant at all. And oftentimes what we have is we have a dream without a plan, and what we have is a pipe dream or a daydream. It's just something that stirs in our heads, right? Listen, this is, Matt and I know this, because what I can do is I can live in my head and I can build all kinds of things. I love whiteboards. I love journals. Like my journals are full of amazing kingdom dreams, amazing things that what if God could, maybe God could, and I just want to live in my head. And I want to live in, because when the dream is in your head, right? When it's in discover and design, before it moves to develop and deploy, it's idealized. And it's all perfect, and it's all beautiful, and it's all roses. But when you start to build the wall, Sanballat is there. When you start to build the wall, there's opposition that comes against you. There's hard things that come. And so we've got to build a dream that actually holds with a plan. And this is why all 4 of these steps are possible. So like, what happens if you do discovery without design? Think about that. Discovery without design. What happens is we don't count the cost, right? We stay in our idealized version of our dream. We listen, but we don't obey, right? So we're always in this space of listening to God and like, oh, that's good. And we love that space because we love to hear God like call out our identity. You could do this. You could do this. I put this in you. I invest in you. Like, ooh, thanks, Jesus. This is amazing. But we don't ever want to walk into it and obey. What happens if we do design without development? So we actually have designed something, we've actually built something, but now we don't have the skills to pull it off. And then the very first time trouble comes, we're stuck. And so a lot of times we've designed something, it looks beautiful on the whiteboard. I don't know if you've ever done this. Like in your journal, this dream looks amazing, but when you start living it out, it's really, really hard. And so we've got to embrace the grind. We've got to embrace the blisters. We've got to move towards action. We've got to have one of our foundational principles at KDI is to have a bias towards redemptive action. When you don't know what to do, love and serve. Have a bias towards redemptive action. If you're stuck, think about your customer. Think about your client. Think about the person that you built the dream for, and how do you love and serve them? How do you bless them? How do you care for them? Have a bias towards those things. What happens when you have development without discovery? What happens is you live somebody else's dream. What happens is you haven't fallen in love with the problem and the people that you're serving. You haven't fallen in love with them, and so there's burnout along the way, and you get stuck. And all of this, when we never deploy in all of this. And here's what gets us stuck. I'll just give you one last corner. The last corner of deployment is always about fear. It's always about vulnerability. We get to the place where we've gone to the edge of our obedience. That's what Jesus asks us to do. And we've got to take that one last step, which feels like a leap. And we back off. And we shrink back. The scripture says we are not a people who shrink back. We're the people who trust God, and we take that extra step of obedience, even though it's vulnerable. Like even launching KDI, guys, has been terrifying for me. I've worked with other organizations in the past, and I've always been able to hide behind somebody else's name. I've always been able to hide behind other leaders and say, well, if something goes wrong, well, it's their fault. And the only person I have to blame is me now, and Matt a little bit. All right? That's it. And so we're in this place where it's like, it's vulnerable and it's scary and it's frightening, and I've got to take the leap, and I've got to actually have some faith for what's going to happen. So here's what I want to do. I want to bring up my friend Dave Warner. Dave is from the Columbus area in Ohio, which means he's super holy. He's a Buckeye, and you don't even understand how much they hate Ohio State down here, Dave.
Oh. Ouch.
They just despise us. Have a seat here.
Sure.
So Dave got connected to me and Matt. You heard a podcast.
I heard a podcast last May
that I was on.
that you were on, the Gravity Leadership Podcast.
Yeah. So some friends of mine asked me to be on their podcast, asked me to talk about Kingdom Dreams Initiative, and I kind of shared, and you listened to it, and were like...
It spoke to my heart because it lifted out exactly what we are trying to do in Newark, Ohio. We're east of Columbus. But if I may just tell a little bit about our Kingdom Dream.
Yes.
So I've always had an itch. I didn't know it was called a Kingdom Dream until I heard you talking. It was just like this itch. I've been in established churches, mainline denominational churches that do dutiful plans and nightmares really well. I've been actually 22 years now of ministry generally in those quadrants. And I've had this itch, and a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur, he was purchasing this building. I actually have some slides. If you could show that first one, you could see this building. It's an entire block. And he was buying this building. It's like on that left side, this entire block. And if you see those columns, there's a ballroom upstairs. And he was relaying to me this story about his girlfriend who was studying to be a nurse. She had a 3-year-old son. And what she would do is go to McDonald's and let her son play while she studied for her nursing degree. And he's telling me this. He's like, this is really hard for her. And he asked this question that sticks with me today. He said, can the church do better? Can the church do better? Now, mind you, this guy doesn't go to church. But he's asking me, can the church do better? And I'm like, I think we can. Let's figure it out. So that started a process of these building blocks that we kind of had into it. You know, like we had no idea what we were doing. And we stumbled on a business model called the Play Cafe. And a Play Cafe is basically a playland at the mall meets a coffee shop. And if you have young kids, maybe there's some in this area. Maybe, I don't know if you all have those down here. So we started visiting. You have kids, but Play Cafes are brilliant. I wish I had a Play Cafe when my kids were little.
We wore out Chick-fil-A.
Okay, there was Playland. They have a Playland.
It's dirty and gross, and
Yeah, so we were like, the church can do better. So you can go to the next one. We built this place. It took years, actually. A beautiful play space that we actually keep it clean. Like we clean that thing. Yeah, and that's one of the things that on our Facebook people comment, it's so clean. But the idea was that we could create a space, a third space. Third space is kind of a known strategy where it's not your home, it's not your work or your school. It's a third space where people come together. And could we create a third space where the people of Jesus could intersect with the people not yet of Jesus? And so we created Little Arrows Play Cafe with that in mind. And then thousands of people started coming. And previously, at the church where we had these dutiful plans that nobody really engaged with. And we were losing young families, millennials. We weren't having new children come in. We had a great crop of preschoolers grow up and graduate, and we never replaced those kids. And suddenly, we started just being with people at Little Arrows Play Cafe who had preschool children and younger and older, and so we started seeing thousands of people. And we had these. I mean, it wasn't honestly me; it was our team. Started doing mobs groups, Bible studies, just living life with these women. And if I could just tell this one story real quick, the first day we opened, we launched. We did like a pre-launch kind of thing, like just to see if we could do it. And we met this young lady named Christina. And Christina had 2 kids, one of which was special needs. And on that day, that pre-launch day, she booked a birthday party. She was our first birthday party booking. We didn't even know we could do it. Sure we do birthdays. Yeah, it turns out that's how we make money. So she books a birthday party for about 2 months later, and then that time rolls around for her to do the party, and little Olive was sick, actually, and she had to go to the hospital, and they couldn't do it. So instead of giving her money back, she said, what if I turn it into an annual pass? Oh, yeah, we can do that too, So she actually gave us more money, and then because she had an annual pass, now we saw her every week or 3 times a week, or as long as she was healthy, little Olive was healthy. Well, then fast forward 18 months, now we've got a great relationship with Christina. And she has no family in town. Her husband's from Florida. He's a pilot. So for Delta, he's flying all over the place. She's from Tennessee. She has no family. We are essentially her family, along with her small group that she now has at Little Arrows Play Cafe. And I invited her. She's not coming to our worship service yet because we planted a worship service upstairs in that ballroom. She's not coming to worship. But we were going to do like a baby dedication. And I asked her, would you like us to pray over your children? She's like, yeah, let me think about it. And she eventually decided to come, and she never missed a Sunday after that, so long as Olive was healthy. And then in February of 2020, on a Saturday morning at 3 a.m., I get a call from her small group leader. She says, hey, I'm at the hospital. Olive is crashed, actually. She's not doing well. And I said, well, keep me posted. What do we need to do? And then at 5:30, she calls, Olive passed away. And so I went over to the hospital, and I could do nothing but just weep with her, wrap our arms around her. Her husband was in Cincinnati at the time. He wasn't even there. And then pretty soon here come her small group participants, these other moms that have met because of Little Arrows Play Cafe, and they just surrounded her with love. And now, actually, long story short, Christina Tharp is our first paid director of Little Arrows Play Cafe. All because a group of people decided we can do church better. We can do better. We can find ways to live out kingdom dreams. And part of our DNA with Little Arrows, you can go to the next slide where some of our church, like we meet in this ballroom upstairs. And as we were building the church, we said, can we be an incubator for these kinds of things, that we can launch more third space opportunities where the people of Jesus can interact with the people not yet of Jesus in a non-threatening way, and build relationships with them, and build more churches and build more kingdom value into our towns and homes and everywhere we can find them. But the problem is we never had a process. And a couple other churches came to us like, hey, Dave, help us start a Play Cafe. And I'm like, just pray real hard and work real hard, man. That's all I got for you. We worked our tails off because we just had to learn how to do it all. And then I heard that podcast, and I was like, these guys, they have it. They've got a process. They've got it figured out. I want to learn how to do that. And that was last May. And now, look, I'm here on stage telling you about it. You know, it's not even been a year because it works. Every time we learn something new in our building blocks, I'm like, man, I wish I'd have known that back in 2017, 2016. I wish I'd have known that. That would have been great to know. And so I've told our congregation about Kingdom Dreams twice, once in September and once again last Sunday. And every time I talk about it, there's a line of people waiting to talk to me after church to tell me what their dream is. I want to be able to do this, Dave. Can you help me? Yeah, I can help you. I hope this awakens something in you, because God is already stirring something in every believer's heart. And there's a way to get there, to get around that corner, to get to the next building block, to take that next step. I like the words that Ben and Matt use, like, what's the domino that needs to go down first so that the rest of the dominoes can fall and you can get to the place where God is leading you? And what is it that is your dream? So that you're no longer, I'm not gathering people to fulfill my dreams, but we're working to fulfill the dreams that God has given you.